Not yet live. Now we're live. Now we're live. Okay, here we go, everybody. In 3, 2, 1. It's the preseason. It kicks off tonight, and we've already got a rash of injuries. We've got games tonight going on right now. Washington and the Patriots. Cam Newton is playing. Who's playing? Who's not? Who's going to do good? Who's not? We're going to talk about it all tonight. It's the Audible Live. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, Dr. Jene Bramel, and Dr. Jene. We're going to start in Baltimore because fantasy GMs are all up in arms and all dismayed about what happened with Rashad Bateman. What's the latest?
Yeah, it sounds like a situation where he was dealing with some sort of abdominal, maybe even a groin injury before, and then had something happen in practice where first day back tried to open it up a little bit. And sounds like an aggravation. It's been called a groin injury. Indications are that he's going to have surgery and miss some time. Could be a core muscle situation. Usually when you hear the abdomen and groin at the same time, you think about that sports hernia. The video that we saw makes you wonder whether it was more of a little bit of a groin issue where it's a little bit closer to the leg. That's what we're hearing as well. But regardless, surgery is going to be a 6 to 8 week situation. There's rumors that he's likely to start the year on injured reserve, and the rules this year are still that you can return after 3 weeks. So that would put him back pretty early in the regular season. It's not unreasonable to think that's the case. Players who have these sorts of surgeries usually need a little bit more time, even after the physical recovery, to really get back into gameplay. But I don't think this is likely to limit him throughout the rest of the season, but it's probably going to be mid-season before we really see him hit his stride.
Gene, you're too humble as always. I will say, and I could be wrong about this, but the very first person to put together the groin soreness and potential for core muscle injury was, of course, Dr. Jene Bramel. But that's why you're listening to the show. That's why you like what we do. Gene, it makes me worried when people tell me to not be worried. Dak Prescott, no big deal. No big deal?
Well, I'll say this. I don't see a scenario in which repeating an MRI a few days into a throw-in program is considered part of the standard rehab protocol. So Prescott himself says he didn't feel any soreness. There wasn't any setbacks. The Cowboys official account, Twitter account, seemed to go out of its way to say that this wasn't an issue. But I don't know why you need an MRI to say, oh, yeah, you're not having any pain. He's told us that he's not having any pain. So, and I don't know why this would have been something that you would expect to happen during the rehab process. So I think there's reason for concern that somebody thought that this was necessary. It doesn't necessarily have to be a setback. They may just be checking up on him very early in the rehab protocol. We're still a month away from week 1, but what I said yesterday was, if we go another 8 to 10 days without him being allowed to throw, then you have to worry about whether or not there's be some rust that needs to be knocked off in week 1 or week 2 and beyond. But I still don't think this is necessarily going to be a long-term lingering situation. It seems like the Cowboys continue to want to be cautious about this, but you would definitely like to see him throwing again sooner than later.
Well, Gene, you give new meaning to the term FF in the groin, which was one of my favorite articles by Mike McGregor, longtime fantasy analyst who does absolutely fantastic work. But yeah, wondering if we could move a little bit further up the body and talk about Justin Jefferson's AC sprain. And there's a week-to-week diagnosis you have for him. But What do you think about week 1 there?
Yeah, I think it's possible. What you never know for sure with these wide receivers is whether or not there's enough disruption in the joint where it's going to take more time to heal than you expect. And wide receivers need to be able to catch away from their body. They need to be able to use their hands and their arms to separate. They need to be able to block at certain points. So there's a lot that goes into the upper body there. And they get taken to the ground on the shoulder very often, or they're diving for balls with their arms away from their body. So you see some reasons for difficulty there. I don't usually get too worried about relatively low-grade injuries. And if we're not talking about surgery, even if this turns into a 3 to 4 week recovery, Justin Jefferson proved to us last year that he's a capable player, and there's not a lot that he needs to do in training camp to prove that he's ready. He just needs to stay in condition. And this being an upper body injury, you wouldn't expect him to have a lot of reconditioning situations when he comes back. So it's a matter of, is there going to be enough time with this particular injury? And we've not known the answer to this yet, for him to be fully recovered and the ability to not wear a harness or any particular padding or anything like that might protect him in week 1. I am not pessimistic about him at all. I think there's a good chance he's ready for a full workload without any restrictions come opening week.
It is the Audible Live here at the Footballguys.com podcast. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, and Dr. Jene Bramel going around the injury news and notes. And what is it with rookie receivers, dude? Because I asked you about Rashad Bateman. Now I'm going to ask you about Elijah Moore, another guy that people were super excited about. Now, Gene, super upset about. What do we know with the Jets rookie receiver?
I don't think we know much more other than it's a quad situation that's concerning enough to the team for them to want to get an MRI. And again, that's not that concerning. Football players all the time to better define the injury and give a very good idea of where rehab may start and finish, often get imaging studies. So this could be a situation where it's a little bit more day to day and week to week. And as we've been saying the past couple of weeks, these players, especially if they're expected to be an important part of the offense like Elijah Moore is to the Jets, knowing that he's a rookie and yes, you'd like some chemistry with Zach Wilson there, is just a player that's going to get time to fully heal. There's no sense in risking an aggravation that could set him back even further. So I expect to hear more about the MRI Friday, maybe even through the weekend, and we'll get a better sense there. But there's no reason to suspect this is going to be a day-to-day situation. Don't expect to see him back to practice, maybe even this week. Hopefully we get good news and that it's more of a 1 to 2 week situation than a 3 to 4. But this is one where we're going to have to wait for the MRI for a little bit more guidance.
All right, Gene. This is another one of those solved for X. It has to do with Curtis Samuel. Had a groin issue in June. He was activated from the COVID list and put on the PUP list. So he hasn't been able to practice 2 weeks into camp. The good news is, I guess it's good news that he knows Scott Turner's offense. That's about it. He doesn't need time to ramp up in the office. Can you give us any sort of optimistic take on Curtis Samuel right now?
I mean, not really. I feel like there's been a couple of different viewpoints around Washington with him so far. I felt like shortly after he was put on the COVID list, there was some indication that this was more of a day-to-day situation. And then shortly after, we hear that there's no timetable for his return. And what does that mean in the middle of August in training camp? It's difficult to say. Hopefully, this is a short-term stay on the PUP list, but we're going on 2 weeks into camp now, coming off COVID, and that's where we end up. If it's true that he's been dealing with this since June, it's a major issue. It suggests that either this was a really high-grade injury that could limit him indefinitely, or maybe there was an aggravation as we got a little bit closer to camp, or he's just not in condition enough to go. So I'm going to abide by that sort of what do we look like 10 to 14 days ahead of week 1 scenario. If he's not off the PUP list and starting the reconditioning process, then week 1 is clearly in doubt. If he comes off the PUP a little bit sooner, navigates that reconditioning phase in the next, the week or so after he comes off successfully and he's fully practicing, then we're okay for week 1. But he is going to be a tough call for those of you that are drafting in the next couple of weeks. I don't think you're going to have enough information to know for sure by then.
Gene, there are 2 receivers that I've studied in the years that I've been doing the RSP who could catch the football by just trapping it and got away with it in the NFL, and that's Early Doucette and Golden Tate. One guy who seemed to be correcting that issue was DJ Chark and made real strides in his second year, but now he's got a finger injury, and I'm just wondering, how long that's going to take, or is he going to be resorting to some of the stuff he tried at LSU, like using his elbow to clamp it up against his helmet or things like that?
There doesn't seem to be too much concern about this particular injury. Finger fractures, not anything you'd want to hear with a wide receiver for the reasons you talked about. The hands are important to catch the ball, and for a player that has fought the ball in the past and struggled to catch with his hands, it's a concern. I don't think there's much question that he's going to be available for week 1. What that means for Jacksonville's offense and whether or not he gets a little bit pushed to the side by some of the other players that are there, and what's happening with Trevor Lawrence and the chemistry that needs to be generated there is an open question. So I think probably the longer term concern is whether or not those things go in his favor than not, because I think all signs suggest that he's going to be ready for week 1 from a physical standpoint.
It is the Audible Live here Thursday night with football. I wanted to say real football, but it's preseason. It doesn't count, but it does matter. People wanting to see Mac Jones before it starts to rain. Of course, it didn't rain down at the Senior Bowl. There's your drink. Let's move on and talk about Joe Burrow playing in the preseason, right? The Bengals are admitting that. That was a news item today. Zach Taylor left the door open for Burrow playing in the final 2 preseason games. He says, I'm not ready to rule out anything for future games. Should he?
I think that's up to him. And I think that's probably where Taylor is going as well. If Joe Burrow says, you're putting me in yellow, red jersey during camp, and players know that my own teammates know that they shouldn't come close to me because they don't want to risk any issues. And Burrow says, I really need live game action and true live game action, not team drills in that situation. Then maybe they let him go out for a series or two and hope for the best. I think some of that is going to have to do with whether or not the offensive line is fully healthy. They're dealing with some injuries there, players that haven't been practicing. And if you've got a third string tackle out there, then no, he is not going to be out there during a preseason game, and the team will go ahead and make that call. But if the offensive line is there and fully healthy and ready to go, maybe you put him out there for a series and get his feet wet before he's got to do that for real in live game play in week 1. So I think most of this is going to be up to what Burrow wants to do, but the team will have a little bit of an override if the offensive line isn't ready to go yet.
Gene, you're very calming. Always. And I think that your advice to everybody, hey, let's really start to tighten the screws and get concerned when we're a week or two away from the season, is very wise. However, and this comes back to an ongoing discussion for years we've had with you, Dr. Gene, the term injury prone and whether we look at certain players differently. Will Fuller, Devontae Parker, who started camp on the PUP list, I think was activated, but now missed practice again. Do we make an exception for them that we know that the injury seal is already broken and it's only August?
Sure. I mean, why not? You're going to do it anyway. Nothing I tell
Yes.
you. I'm not
True.
talking about
Yes.
you. I'm not talking about you.
There's Dr. Gene the side. Now you can run on the couch. Let's flip the script here, Gene. This is perfect.
Bloom, lay down.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's absolutely
Happily.
no way that I'm going to be able to convince anybody that Will Fuller is, when he's not even made it through one practice in training camp. The 1 year so far that he seemed to be successful, he gets popped for PEDs. And I'm not drawing any lines here necessarily. I'm just saying, for me to sit here and say, oh yeah, don't worry about Will Fuller, we don't have to consider a player like him injury prone. No. I think there is good reason to be concerned. The longer it takes a player to recover from a soft tissue injury that we don't know when it happened and we can't gauge the initial timetable of it, Fuller made it through a couple of snaps. Does that mean that there was something going on earlier in the preseason before camp started and now there's an issue? It's hard to know. I think I misspoke a little bit last week when I said we weren't really sure what was going on. It had been reported that it was a foot injury, but that's nebulous. It's hard to know what that means. And yeah, now we're going on 2 weeks where he's not even been healthy enough to do any conditioning and you're concerned. Devontae Parker, sort of the same thing, but at least he was cleared off the PUP list to come back. And maybe this is what we always say. You got to navigate those first 7 to 10 days of reconditioning without any injuries before you're reassured that, okay, they're as healthy as they can be going into the season. So Will Fuller is the poster child for this. And we can give countless examples of folks that had a litany of injuries and then did fine. Will Fullers have always tended to be soft tissue situations, and now you're dealing with a foot. So I would be concerned about Will Fuller for sure, but you're not going to get me to go all the way so far as saying he's injury prone without knowing specifically what his exam and imaging findings would be and whether or not it's something he's dealt with in the past and it's the type of injury that he'd struggle with moving forward. But again, there's every reason to be concerned about a player that has shown that it's been difficult for him to stay on the field with soft tissue stuff in the past.
Gene, I love the view with the blinds up there. And I'm just wondering if you've trained those squirrels to take your neighbor's mail like that. Made you look. Okay, so another made you look type of player. Look at G. He's like so mad he muted himself. So no.
We don't have squirrels. Not in the other place we did. But the reason I wanted to look is we've got a family of fox that live out the front yard there. So I was wondering whether or not we might have some friends out there that were chasing us around. A few swipers out there.
See, that's cool. See, I might have mistaken a squirrel for a fox. Maybe I need to go back to the optometrist. Since my dad retired, I haven't been able to find a good one. So Dwayne Eskridge, toe injury. This is a guy that seems to be very exciting player when you watch him on tape, and he really showed up in OTAs, but we haven't really seen anything of him since. What could this bleed on into the season where this is like an all-year thing for him? or is this something that you expect to, kind of clear up since he's considered day-to-day?
It's going to be an all-year thing for him. The reason I marked him day-to-day, there seems like there's lots of optimism in Seattle. Pete Carroll has mentioned this as well, that they've seemed to have worked out an orthotic that they can put in a shoe that's allowing him to move without that much pain. But that's something he's going to have to play with. And depending on, what position his foot gets in, maybe there could be a little bit of some pain and soreness that limits him in practice. And with a rookie, that's a big situation. So it looks like he's about ready to come off the PUP list, and we should see him practicing soon based on what we're told. But yeah, these sorts of injuries, they're going to linger. And if we're getting to the point where we've got to fashion a very specific orthotic for him to be able to practice, then it's likely something that we're going to see maybe limit him off and on during the season.
It is the Audible Live here, everybody, and we have Real Football on. We're watching Mac Jones put in the work, so we'll get you some updates on that as he's going second level. I haven't seen him dump off once. So, Dr. Jene, we certainly appreciate you. Appreciate all of your work. And a quick story is my daughter's leaving next month for Oregon State. And what's the pre-med? What's your major before pre-med? Whatever
Biology?
that is.
Lots of places are different. Some places I think you can still actually major in pre-medicine where you don't have to choose a very specific science discipline. But it could be anything. It could be biology, could be physics, could be zoology. Lots of different things could have.
Drinking?
Okay, so she says, because I've told her about you and your family, and she goes, "Are you kidding me? That's my dream, is to be like those guys." So I just wanted to share that with you, Dr.
Tell her
Jene.
we said hello. For
As
sure.
always,
she's welcome to reach out anytime. You and I haven't talked about this. I didn't realize that was a thing for her.
And I've told her because she wants to be a surgeon. I was like, "You need to talk to Dr. Jene."
Oh yeah, no, you don't need to talk to me. You need to talk to somebody else in the house about that. There's somebody else in this house that would be perfect for her. So feel free to give her my number, and I'll put the two of them in touch.
We will set that up. He's Dr. Jene Bramel. Check out his work at footballguys.com. Dr. Jene, be well, my friend.
Good luck, everybody. Have a good week. See you.
Boom. There he is. Dr. Jene Bramel. Ladies and gentlemen, Sigmund, we don't get to say this not often in the offseason because there's no football, but give us a game update. Mac Jones working. Has he thrown an incompletion yet?
I have to admit, I don't have the game in view, so maybe I should say Cecil, their deeper game update. Have to go ahead.
Matt?
No, I was going to. I'm not surprised that he's going downfield. He's an aggressive quarterback.
He is working the second level of the defense. There's just one incompletion on an end zone throw. They're about at the 35-yard line. But Jones coming out, and I don't want to get too ahead of the hype, Matt, but I mean, does Cam Newton need to play? If Jones is going to perform like this, I know it's the first preseason game. Trust me, I've done this a million times, but Mac Jones is looking so damn comfortable out there.
Well, let's talk some film-based facts. And say that Mac Jones, I had Mac Jones for a long time number one on my board, and there were just a few things that I got to see a little bit later on that dropped him down a bit, but he was still third, and he wasn't a distant third behind Trevor Lawrence and Trey Lance to me. I thought he had fantastic pocket presence, and he was very aggressive going downfield, and he's a player that, then we start thinking about narratives that are fun. You get the whole, Nick Saban basically getting angry because he's trying to coach his defense on something, and Mac Jones keeps throwing touchdowns, and he literally had to tell Mac Jones to stop, and Mac Jones was like, "I'm not quitting. Tell the defense to stop me, and I'll stop throwing touchdowns." And that was a story I think Saban told. And then the fact that Josh McDaniels from your time in Denver, and Josh McDaniels has the reputation of being like the old version of Vince Lombardi before the former players basically told him he needed to cut it out and like stop yelling at everybody and be like, a real coach. And Josh McDaniels is a real OC for sure, but he's a guy that likes to yell at folks. And I think it's a kind of a backhanded compliment when he tells the media, Mac Jones is very good at getting yelled at. It sounds like something that would be mean, but the fact that Josh can like grind him into the dirt and not have Jay Cutler turn to Ted Sundquist and go trade me after the first conversation, because that's what went down according to Ted Sundquist in Denver. Mac Jones can take criticism. He can give it back. He's quick. The players keep talking about how he's reliable already, and we can count on him. The veterans in New England are saying that about him. So the fact that that's going on, and Trent Brown said they think he can be special. He said he's got some things to figure out, but he can be special. To me, everyone talked about him being a good fit because he's Tom Brady. But the more I watched him, the more I think he's more like Peyton Manning. I think he's a little more creative. I think he's a little bit more aggressive. And he's someone that, thinks and acts quickly, but also has a little bit of a swagger to him in a different way that Brady has that swagger.
Bloom,
Yeah.
what do they do here if they're put in a position where Jones looks like this in the preseason?
I think that they already have a plan here, and I would expect that the third preseason game may be the opportunity for Jones to take the mantle from Cam Newton, but it sounds like while Jones has been maybe more consistent, Newton has shown more of the ability of when Newton's running hot, he's running really hot. The picture that was painted by Patriots beat writers before camp was 51-49 wasn't really going to be good enough for Mac Jones. So there's the other part of this equation with Cam Newton. It's difficult to discern right now. I think that this is absolutely a quarterback battle that's going to be decided in the next few weeks. But I do think when we look at this situation, when we look at Trey Lance, when we look at Justin Fields, all of these are fluid and changing in the moment. When we hear the veteran stamp of approval, if the organization's a good organization, that has to weigh into the decision because you cannot lose the locker room. The locker room can see, and I guess Cam Newton is maybe an exception here because Cam Newton has such a great rapport with his teammates. But I go back to Jacksonville, and I think where everything went really awry in Jacksonville was when they extended Bortles, when everybody could see that the team was dragging Bortles to victories. Everything starts to disintegrate. So I do think that as long as you hear the veterans giving him that stamp of approval, and he's not giving them a reason to make him second place in this quarterback competition, we have to be open to this. And then, of course, the downstream stuff is, well, Damian Harris, although Damian Harris actually is 1A to Sony Michel's 1B. A lot of really good reports about Sony Michel. And remember, the best football we probably have seen from Sony Michel in his career was the second half of the year last year. That was when he started to look more. He'll never be the Sony Michel that we hoped he was going to be when he went in the first round, but he was a much better running back in the second half of the year last year, and we didn't see him as somebody that was just a shadow of what we thought he could be. So that looks like a 1A, 1B, so that could make that a little more murky. Maybe Jacoby Myers, who's been the most consistent receiver in Patriots camp, but it's difficult because this is going to be a low-volume passing game, and there might not be a fantasy move if you get a strong feeling one way or the other on Mac Jones and Cam Newton, but he's giving them a lot to think about.
A lot to think about tonight as we've got preseason action going on. It's the Audible Live. Sig, what you sucking on? What you drinking
this
there?
This is a Wicked Weed. It's a cherry a cherry almond sour.
Okay.
So I'll take the wheel since you gave it back to me. How about this real quick? And it hasn't been consummated yet. I just saw this and I had to rub my eyes. Joe Schobert, Pittsburgh Steeler.
Joe Schobert, Pittsburgh Steeler.
Trade in the works.
Okay, really? Who's reporting this?
NFL.com.
Okay.
Among others.
React, Bloom.
I think.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I feel like, and it's not done yet. And there's some talk that because he signed like a 5-year, $53 million deal. Tom Pelissero, see that cherry almond sour beer, making me thick-tongued. Just 26 minutes ago, he says the Jags have agreed to trade Joe Schobert to the Steelers. And the first on the story, by the way, was his wife, Megan Schobert, not Tom Pelissero's wife. So it's interesting here simply because, well, I liked Robert Spillane. I liked what he did for the Steelers last year. But this is that point, since we talked about this in the preseason watch list, which we just wound up today. Teams have gotten a chance to see what they have for 2 weeks now. And this could go both ways, right? Because you have Urban Meyer, and you have Trent Baalke, and you have the new regime in Jacksonville. And they paid Joe Schobert at the top of the market when they signed him. Maybe they don't see him as a top of the market linebacker anymore. They don't want to pay top of the market money. There is some talk that they're going to pick up part of his salary. So maybe when we hear the trade compensation going back, we might not be too happy, But I think the initial reaction when we saw the trade conversation going back for Minkah Fitzpatrick was, that could be a very high pick. So maybe it's a second-day pick for Schobert. But I think the Steelers continue to be in one last ride with Ben. Let's see what we can do. They see Spillane, I guess, as a weakness, especially in coverage. And we'll see. Schobert now paired up with Devin Bush.
Okay, there you go. And Devin Bush, stop tweeting videos of cats dying. Like, that's weird, dude. Like, sorry. Like, when his old teammates are telling him, like, dude, you got to calm your ass down. Like, Devin Bush, what are you doing, man? Like, seriously. Anyway, Bloom, are you on an empty stomach? What's going on there?
You know what? I haven't. You're right. You're right. I am. See, you knew it. You knew it. I was going to have dinner after the show.
Okay. All right. Okay. That's
I'm a
good.
lightweight.
Matt Waldman, Taylor Heinicke, who just got sacked, by the way, but he could ball, man. And we have to look at it in the situation of Ryan Fitzpatrick, might start hot, but he always fizzles, and then he'll come back and be hot for 3 games. So the chances of Taylor Heinicke, who we're watching now against the Patriots, the chances of him playing, Matt, are very good, in my opinion, and the chances of him performing well are actually very good. I like Heinicke. I liked him at the Shrine game years ago. Coming out of Old Dominion, we've talked on this show, like if he was 6'5" instead of 6 feet tall, he'd have been a second-round pick.
Yeah, he can move too. He can move around the pocket.
First down with his legs.
Yeah, he buys time really well, and this is the case too of where sometimes you have players who I wouldn't necessarily say they're late bloomers, but they're guys who. And I had to kind of get thick-tongued when I said Bloom. I think at that point in honor of him, I just realized that it was kind of Freudian. I think going on there, but it was one of those situations where I think that there are certain players that continue their growth. And that's not always the case with a lot of NFL pros as they come into the league. Oftentimes you hear they're really the same guys that they were in college. You'll hear that a lot from certain analysts. But I think that there are certain players who do continue to grow as they get into the game. And I think Heinicke's shown that he's one of them. Obviously he's a worker. He's earned the trust of multiple coaching staffs, I think, to be on an active roster and to develop from being a practice squad guy who was with the Vikings, early on in his career, and to be able to be here now with Ron Rivera's group and playing as well as he is, that they even talked about him possibly being a starter at some point, that it's nice for them to have a strong backup caliber quarterback. This is a guy who gives you a little bit of what Brian Hoyer gave at a time in his career where people, at least the perception was, this guy could start for you if you really needed him to. Maybe you don't want him to own the whole deal, but he can help us win games or at least not blow the game, and sometimes that's very important in this league because there is not a lot of depth at the position, and if you just keep from blowing it, you're valuable
Player. Vibes of Tony Romo. Doesn't mean he's going to work out like Romo or choke in the postseason like Romo, but our man Josh brings up the fact that when he kicked in that screen door trying to help his buddy move in or whatever, like somebody left the keys in the apartment, that's when it kind of went down there. But Taylor Heinicke can ball out, Bloom, and that's the thing. Like, I don't think Ryan Fitzpatrick plays the whole season. He's certainly not a long-term answer. Maybe Heinicke is.
Right. Again, since we talked about this during the preseason watch list, we've talked about this before. There's that Ryan Fitzpatrick circle. Where are you on the circle? Well, he's the rousing backup that fires everybody up and everybody overperforms. Then there's he becomes a starter, and then inevitably he gets benched. So is that going to happen this year? Certainly, history tells us it's possible, especially whenever Taylor Heinicke has been practicing well, and Ron Rivera is not the type that's going to tolerate too many turnover fests. Fitzpatrick plays at that edge where he can make some magical things happen, Fitzmagic, but also he gets himself back on the bench. The other thing I'll point out here, which I pointed out many times, is go back and watch Taylor Heinicke when we look in context and see what the Tampa Bay defense did later on in the playoffs. He was impressive, very impressive. They were able to hang in that game with Heinicke. So I think that even if it's Heinicke, it still represents a material improvement from the quarterback play they got last year. So we should still be optimistic about this team, especially when we look at where the Eagles are at, where the Giants are at, where the Cowboys are at right now with the Dak Prescott questions. So I think it's really intriguing. And I've been saying in your 2 quarterback superflex leagues, end of your draft, you want to take Taylor Heinicke because at some point he's going to get the call.
He's going to get the call, and you've got to be ready for the call. It is the Audible Live here, Thursday night, Footballguys.com. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman. Have to tell you about Fan Up. Make sure to check it out. This contest is in the app, is what everybody's talking about. Download that app, Fan Up, in the App Store. Must be 18 years or older to play. Restrictions apply per state. Join that awesome community of over 50,000 fantasy and esports fans who love to compete against each other and team up as friends for the ultimate prizes and bragging rights. Sign-up start this week. They end on Thursday, September 9th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Check out the Flex Frenzy, where your flex players does 1.5 multiplier. You got that right. Flex Frenzy, and they're crowning their first ever MVF most valuable fan this season. Will it be you? It is Fan Up. Download that app right now, wherever you get your apps, and fan up and just be fans. Matt, why is Pat Mahomes going to play a quarter in the preseason opener? I did a radio segment last night about with Nick Ferguson. He said, Cecil. And I said, how can you tell someone is a franchise quarterback? They don't play in the preseason opener. Well, Andy Reid has come out and said not only is Pat Mahomes going to play, but he's going to play a quarter. No Baker Mayfield, no, I think Josh Allen. Like all these quarterbacks aren't going to – Aaron Rodgers not going to play. Some guys aren't even going to play at all in the preseason, right? Was Allen one of those guys? I think I wrote about that today. Either way, Matt, like it's just kind of weird that Andy Reid would choose that, would choose to have Mahomes play a quarter in the preseason opener when every other franchise quarterback's really not playing at all.
Yeah, I mean, that may seem odd, and I mean, we can probably only make assumptions or presumptions about why that is. You know, my speculation would be that either one, he feels like they need to keep Mahomes grounded in some fashion, which I think is probably would be the first fan expectation with that. But I think Patrick Mahomes is probably a fairly grounded guy already, or else he would have been out of control by now, I think, with all the fame that's been tossed his way. The other thing is that they do, you know, Mecole Hardman's a guy they really want to get active and are really trying to sell hard as a guy who can actually be a top receiver, or at least a high-end contributing receiver on this team. And maybe they feel like they want to give him and other young receivers reps with Mahomes in game situations that are fitting for what Mahomes would do, but the other quarterbacks wouldn't. So, you know, it might have to do with his teammates more than it has to do with him. But, you know, either way, you know, a lot of people will look at this and say it's risky because if Mahomes gets hurt in the preseason, then you're going to hear about it. It's going to be fodder for pretty much everybody to criticize. At the same time, you know, maybe there's some things that with the offense that they've added in that are new that they feel like he needs to get a little game rep experience doing. And we'll see whether or not, if it's mostly running plays and quick, short little passes off of adjustments, then we'll know that it's probably certain aspects of the game that don't really have much to do with him that they're going to feel safe enough with him doing. Now, if they're having him drop 5 steps, 7 steps, and winging that ball downfield against blitzes, then yeah, I'm with you. I'm wondering what the heck's going on.
What in the world's happening? By the way, Bloom, it is Justin Herbert that's not going to play in the preseason. That came out today. But the Mahomes thing is weird. When Herbert's not playing, Mayfield's not playing, like all these guys aren't playing, and then Mahomes is. Weird.
Mayfield needs to play.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that you can really see this either way. This also is related to that question when your team has the first round bye locked up. Do you play your starters in week 17 or week 18 now? And I think history points to, you know, it's okay for players to knock off the rust or keep the rust from forming, as it may be, and get a little bit of game action. Yes, you're risking injury, but this is please. How many times have we seen a quarterback suffer a serious injury in preseason? Have we really? Is there one we can reference? I can't come up with one off the top of my head.
Trent Green.
Oh, there it is.
Yep.
There you go. And what happened? So did the gods take a poop on their head? No, just the opposite. Not that
Well,
that really should be compelling.
If you add Chad Kelly to your roster, Cleveland, that might work out okay for you.
Yeah.
Is Najee Davenport still in the league? No. Look, so I get it. I get it. And here's another reason, Cease. Here's another reason, okay? If you want me to try to solve for X, dissect this. Is Baker Mayfield playing in front of a brand new offensive line with 4 or 5 new starters? I guess there's a couple of new starters with the Chargers and a new offense. But I could see a reason for Mahomes being out there just because of all the little moving parts of a quarterback's drop back. How often do you see in a game, the center or guard will step back and step on the quarterback's foot, or otherwise, you have some new chemistry. I think it would probably just be good, especially because, speaking of Baker Mayfield, Cleveland is up week 1. And Matt, I'm going to hopefully make you smile when I say this. That game could decide the number 1 seed in the AFC when we look back 5 months from now.
When we look back 5 months from now, we'll see what happens out there on the football field. I'm getting distracted. Either way, I'm also distracted by this Jaguars thing, Matt. Come on, Urban Meyer. Come on. You don't need to say that it's a competition. And when asked if there was a chance that Trevor Lawrence wouldn't play or start in week 1, he's like, yeah. And it's like, listen, Gardner Minshew's nice hair, nice story, nice trailer park. But no, dude, he's not the guy. Come on. Urban Meyer, what are you doing?
I think once again, we're looking at a guy who is adjusting to the NFL. And part of that is what he says to the media as an NFL coach versus being a college coach. What is, a lot of times NFL players complain that former college coaches don't treat NFL players like men. So that's a big deal when it comes to how players relate to their coaching staff and whether or not they're going to buy in to what's being sold there. And so Meyer also looks like, if you were going to criticize Urban Meyer, you could look at his draft, and as my buddy our buddy Eric Stoner would say, he basically took Tom Lemming's list off of the top high school 100 and drafted guys off of it. And I mean, there's a little bit of truth to that. He's looking for high-end athletes, but does he know what's going to fit for this team and how that's going to work out? The fact that they're trading or looking to trade CJ Henderson is interesting to me. The top pick they had last year at cornerback, who's a very talented cornerback, and they have nothing on that defense anyway. So now they're trading Joe Schobert. They're trying to trade CJ Henderson. I mean, there's you look at this team and I just wonder what's going on here. But part of it too is organizational. This has been an odd organization for a long time. This was a team that, when Dave Caldwell basically drafted Blake Bortles, I can tell you for a fact that this team really had their eyes on another quarterback who I can tell you that I did not recommend, and I'll just put it in that fashion. I did not recommend, and he went to another really great team, but since now he's about to be replaced. And that's about as much as I can tell you. And the other team, that team really liked him. The scouts really liked him, but the other part of the organization didn't, and they were playing mommy against daddy a little bit with this. And then it turned out that the GM just basically didn't listen to either of the squabbling parties and picked Blake Bortles. So when this team for this long, from that era, like several coaches ago to now, and these players that they were talking about are still in the league, and this is kind of what's going on. It's not surprising that they picked Urban Meyer to coach this team. Hopefully Urban Meyer proves people wrong and has lots of success, but it just seems to me that this is a team that's not really well connected as a as a group, especially above the coaching ranks.
Bloom, Urban Meyer's already dropping the ball.
Yeah. So, I want to go there. That's absolutely where I'm headed. But I will say,
you've been drinking, so go there.
No, because I'll say this: at some point, we have to defer to the people that are there on the scene. And from what I understand, Meyer's getting buy-in. The players are on board. The CJ Henderson thing, it was put on my radar months ago. Okay, it's not anything that surprising. I think to people in the organization, it's not surprising at all. Remember, they went and took Tyson Campbell. They signed Shaq Griffin in free agency and still took Tyson Campbell in the second round, top of the second round. So, take out of that what you will. It's hard to say. As far as what he's doing with Lawrence and Minshew, I think that, as Matt was alluding to, some of that is just the media, right? I mean, there's a layer to this that is, it almost reminds me of Clinton Portis. Remember when Clinton Portis, that wonderful season, someone needs to put together the montage of all the characters that he made up. Remember that wonderful season when every Wednesday Clinton Portis was somebody different? You remember? Was it like Southside Jerome? Or I can't remember. He had different characters, right? And that was brilliant. That was brilliant because if you give the media something to talk about, just like we're talking about right now, then everyone can just do their job. Everyone can just do their business.
And they are there is an idiot factor with how to treat them. Sorry, but it's true.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
the fact that Jamal Williams is beloved, and the thing that gets play is because he literally told the reporters at the presser outside this summer to stop since they make him answer dumb questions. He's going to make them do dumb stuff to ask the question, and had them play rock, paper, scissors. So
exactly.
At least he needs to be in Denver, or Cecil needs to be in Detroit, because then at least Cecil could win rock, paper, scissors because he's epic at it.
Yes.
And he wouldn't be asking Jamal any dumb questions. But that's another point. So
I think that's a good point, the way that Matt brings that up. It's kind of like if your kid really wants attention and you need to do something, and you're like, go count how many fence posts there are next door. Just come give them something to do so you can do what you need to do.
I mean, they need to learn to start watching football before they become beat writers anyway. Some of them just basically talk to people and report stuff based on what's told them,
Matt,
rather than study the game.
We ranted on this earlier. I did. Like, there's reporters who just report, and then there's analysts, and then there's the wannabe analysts, and there's too many outlets. And I'm sorry, that sounds like, I'm so judgmental. Yeah, there's a zillion outlets and a zillion people that don't know what they're doing. There's the access game with these teams where you have to be nice to them or else they cut you off, basically. Oh, the stories that we can
listen.
tell.
If you go to any practices that has major and regional and local media in it for any length of time, this becomes abundantly clear. It's not, and it's just something that I think fans need to know. I mean, it really is, just because there's stuff that you'll see and you'll never know kind of the frame of reference that a lot of these people have. And all I can say is just buyer beware. It's a difficult thing to discern from just on the surface, but there are a lot of folks who will be like, ooh, Nick Vannett is the next Rob Gronkowski, after they watch him in practice. And they didn't watch him in practice. They were talking to 5 other people in practice.
Right. Well, it's like Senior Bowl, Matt. Like, everyone's there, and people are there to play grab ass and tell Dick Cheney jokes. It's like, we're there to work. That's why we had to start hiding in the stands. Like, just alone. But sorry, we'll meet up at Saucy Q, and then we'll talk. So we'll tie a bow on things tonight. Not everybody can be Charles Robinson, right, Bloom?
Because exactly, Matt.
Awesome.
All the beat writers need to go through the scouting academy. Send them over to Dan Hatman.
Send them to Dan.
I agree.
That could work. That could work.
Charles and our buddy Charles McDonald. I'll just say I love old Chuck, but Chuck notwithstanding, listen to Bloom.
Yeah.
Let's do this thing. Let's do this thing. All right. That's a wrap, everybody. Gotta run. Peace, everyone out there. Thanks for watching. Do all those YouTube things. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. There's Matt Waldman. There's Sigmund Bloom. I'm Cecil Lammey saying stay tuned and stay frosty.